It had been raining all day, the kind of soft, steady rain that soaked you without realizing. Nora Jensen stood at the edge of Old Mill Cemetery, her coat clinging to her arms, and a lantern in her hand, unlit. She stared at the gravestone before her, unreadable in the dark except for the name etched across the stone like a wound, Lucien Theo Mercer. She hadn't cried. Not since the call came 3 months ago. Lost at sea, the voice had said. A freak storm. The wreckage washed ashore days later. No survivors. Lucien had been everything. A chaotic whirlwind of photographs and passion and half-done plans. They'd fought too often, kissed too deeply, and loved like the world could end on a Tuesday afternoon. Now it had ended for him. Her fingers trembled as she lit the lantern. It flickered once, then flared to life. "You always hated cemeteries," she murmured, her voice barely louder than the rain. "Said they made your skin itch." The flame danced, tiny and alive. Like a heartbeat. Behind her, the trees groaned in the wind. She might have turned back then, but she didn't want to look. Didn't want to find out the shape in the woods was real. A cold chill slid across the back of her neck. She wasn't alone. She made it home to her small house near the bay without incident. The quiet followed her there, curling into corners and closets. She peeled off her wet clothes, changed into Lucien's old hoodie, and tried not to look at the photo above the mantel, him, half smiling, camera in one hand, arm wrapped around her. She fell asleep on the couch. At 2:13 a.m., the sound of glass cracked her dreams apart. Her eyes flew open. Kitchen window. Something was there. A flicker of movement, low and fast. Nora stood slowly, heart jackhammering. The lantern from the cemetery sat on the coffee table, still warm. She grabbed it instinctively. Opened the drawer for her father's old pocketknife. There were no lights outside. Just the wind. Then she heard it. A click. The sound of a shutter. A camera. Lucien's camera had made that sound. Not exactly. But close enough to draw every memory back to life. Nora ran outside barefoot, the knife clutched to her side, the lantern shaking in her hand. Nothing. Nothing but the storm-slick ground and the sound of a distant gull. She wanted to scream. Instead, she whispered, "Lucien." No reply. The next morning, Nora found something on her porch. Wrapped in wax paper. No note. Just an old Polaroid photo. It was blurry, but unmistakable. Her, at the cemetery. Holding the lantern. Rain in her hair. Someone had taken her picture last night. And they'd left it for her to find. She brought it inside. Locked every door. Tried to tell herself it was grief. Hallucination. Maybe a stalker. Maybe a cruel joke. Maybe. No, not maybe. She knew that photo style. The grain. The slight overexposure at the top. It was Lucien's. But he was dead. The agency had said so. The Coast Guard had confirmed it. So who was watching her from the trees? He hadn't planned to come back. Not to the town. Not to her. But something about the way the rain fell on Nora's shoulders that night, when she lit the lantern at his grave, dragged Lucien back into the world he'd been running from for months. He'd stood behind the crooked fence line, drenched and hollow, hidden by the trees and a beard he hated. 3 months ago, the world had thought him dead. Truth was, he'd barely survived. And maybe he should have stayed dead. But there she was, alive, hurting, beautiful. And that shattered him more than the storm ever could. The sea hadn't taken him. Not completely. They'd told him to photograph the offshore summit. Routine, they'd said. A political handshake and some oil rig talks between countries who barely liked each other. Lucien had gone because of the paycheck, and because he liked chaos. He hadn't expected the explosion. He remembered the way the sky cracked open. The smell of burning rubber and salt. He remembered the water swallowing him, the cold so sharp it felt like being stitched back together with knives. Then, darkness. And then, cell walls. Metal. Blood on his lip. Someone had pulled him from the wreck. Not to save him. To use him. Lucien wasn't just a photojournalist. Not really. A few years back, he'd seen something he shouldn't have, a cargo manifest tied to a weapons deal on neutral soil. He'd sent the photos to the wrong people. Or the right ones, depending on who you asked. He was a threat. And someone had finally cashed in that threat. He escaped on the 13th day. He slit a guard's throat with a sliver of mirror. Took a boat. Drove it blind. Crashed it into a sandbar 3 miles from the coast. He'd walked barefoot through rocks and mud until he reached a fisherman's shack, collapsing just past the porch. The old man had no name, only one eye, and a sharp machete he used to point at things. But he fed Lucien. Gave him clothes. And never asked questions. After he healed, Lucien vanished into Europe's underbelly. Fake passports. Forged IDs. Freelance security gigs. Watching from windows. Always watching. Always hiding. Because if he'd survived, then someone wanted him dead. And maybe, they wanted Nora dead too. He wouldn't let that happen. Not to her. The first time he saw her again was in June. 6 weeks after the explosion. She was teaching a group of kids to paint by the water's edge. Her hair tied up messily. A paintbrush behind one ear. He hadn't meant to find her. Had just been walking by the bay, following a lead. But when he saw her, Lucien forgot the lead. Forgot the trail. Forgot everything but her voice. He left before she noticed. By mid-July, he was living 2 towns over under the name Jack Greer. An attic apartment with broken floorboards and windows that didn't shut all the way. He didn't care. He set up a camera. Long lens. High angle. He started watching. Not out of obsession, at least that's what he told himself. But for protection. Because someone was watching her. Someone else. He saw them. A silver SUV parked across from her street 3 times in 1 week. A man with 2 smooth shoes loitering near her school. A drone, just once, hovering near her window at 3 a.m. Lucien watched the watchers. Took photos. Built a wall of evidence in his attic. But he still couldn't bring himself to knock on her door. Couldn't let her see the man he'd become. The limp. The scars. The rage. The night he left the photo on her porch, he almost stayed. He stood behind her rosebushes, watching her through the front window. She'd been asleep on the couch. Wearing his old sweatshirt. The Polaroid he left wasn't a message. It was a heartbeat. "I'm alive," it said. "I'm watching over you. I'm sorry." He watched her find it the next morning. Watched her eyes go wide. He saw her hands shake. It broke him. But still, he didn't knock. His days became rituals. Tracking movement. Tracing faces. Circling leads on city maps. His nights were worse. Sleep came in fractured pieces, laced with screams. His. And others. Sometimes, when he couldn't sleep at all, he would listen to old voicemails. Nora's voice on his burner phone. "You left your boots by the door again. Stop eating cereal at 2 a.m. I miss you. Come home." He'd replay them until the battery died. In late August, he followed a man in a black coat from a logistics company near the docks. The man passed a flash drive to a diplomat behind the seafood market. Lucien caught it on camera. When he zoomed in later, frame by frame, he spotted the watermark. It matched the one he'd seen on a document in the room where he was held. Same logo. Same code. It confirmed his worst fear. Whoever had tried to kill him, was still operating. And Nora, whether she knew it or not, was in the middle of it. He waited until the first week of September before reaching out again. This time, a note. No signature. Just a message in pencil on the back of a grocery list. Not safe. They're watching. Don't trust anyone. Meet me where we first kissed. He watched her find it. Saw her read it twice. Saw her bite her lip. Then he saw the silver SUV again. Parked 2 doors down. He left the window and grabbed his keys. She was already there when he arrived. The old pier. It had rotted in places. Seagulls screeched in the distance. The ocean smelt like bruised kelp and diesel. Nora stood at the end of the pier, arms wrapped around herself. Not crying. Just, waiting. He stepped onto the boards. They creaked. She turned. Their eyes met. And for a second, everything else, every secret, every scar, disappeared. Lucien, she said. His name in her mouth cracked him open. It's me, he said. Voice raw. Hoarse. Real. She stared. Then ran. Not away. To him. Her arms wrapped around him so fast he nearly staggered back. He felt her sob against his neck. His hands gripped her back like he might fall without her. You died, she whispered. Not quite, he answered. But close. She stepped back, hands still on his chest. Where the hell have you been? So he told her. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. Enough to make her eyes burn with fury. They said it was a storm, she said. They said your body was lost. He shook his head. They didn't lose me. They buried me on purpose. Nora exhaled. Then slapped him across the face. You left me, she shouted. You let me grieve you. Lucien didn't flinch. I know, he said. And I'll never forgive myself. They stared at each other for what felt like hours. Then she grabbed his shirt and pulled him into a kiss that was anger, forgiveness, desperation, and love all at once. He kissed her back like he might die again. But not tonight. Not with her mouth on his. Not with her hand sliding into his hair. Not with the pier creaking beneath them and the wind finally quieting. Afterward, they sat at the edge of the pier, legs dangling over the waves. What happens now? She asked. Lucien lit a cigarette, passed it to her. Now we disappear. Together. I have a life, Lucien. You won't for long, he said. They're already watching you. Her hand curled into his. Then teach me how to be invisible, she said. And he did. The next few weeks were a blur of hiding, learning, touching, and planning. They lived out of a safe house borrowed from a former contact. No internet. No cell signal. A generator that worked most of the time. Lucien taught Nora how to tail someone. How to shake surveillance. How to use a disposable phone. Nora taught Lucien how to breathe again. How to laugh. How to cook something more edible than canned beans. How to be human. They were both scarred. But together, they started healing. One night, as thunder rumbled across the bay, Nora traced a scar across his collarbone. You should have told me, she whispered. I didn't want to drag you into the fire. I was already burning, Lucien. He kissed her like a man who'd been drowning for months. And finally found air. They had one goal now, expose the truth. He had names. Photos. Audio recordings. She had contacts. Credentials. Brains that never stopped working. They would do it together. Even if it meant vanishing again after. Even if it meant dying. At least this time, they would die side by side. But in his gut, Lucien believed they'd survive. They had to. Because love like this didn't die in storms. And ghosts don't kiss like that. Cassidy Rourke always said that painting was the most honest language she knew. Color didn't lie. Brushstrokes didn't pretend. People did. But not paint. She'd known Nora since they were 9. Back when they painted flowers on rocks and sold them to neighbors for 50 cents apiece. Back when Nora was wild and loud and Cass was the one with the steady hands and quiet mouth. They grew up, changed cities, changed hair, changed dreams, but some things stayed. Like Thursday night dinners. Like the way Nora still hummed when she was concentrating. Like the fact that Nora always came undone in the paint first, before she ever admitted something was wrong out loud. And right now, Nora's paintings were screaming. It started the week Nora came back from a break. She hadn't told Cass much. Just a vague text. Taking some time. Don't worry. I'm safe. And Cass hadn't pried. Because she knew what grief looked like. She'd watched Nora spiral after Lucien's death, missed calls, sleepless eyes, paint-streaked fingernails twitching over a wine glass. She'd thought, maybe space will help. Maybe the silence will settle. But then Nora came back with a different kind of silence. Not the sad kind. The careful kind. And the paintings, God, the paintings. Cass worked part-time at a gallery down on Sycamore Street. She curated 3 local artists and helped organize pop-up shows. Most of the time, she loved it. But today, she couldn't stop staring at Nora's latest piece. Red background. Layered black strokes. Vertical slashes like tally marks over an indistinct form. It looked chaotic. But it wasn't. Cass was too good to miss it. There was rhythm. Symmetry. Even math in it. 6 strokes. Pause. 4 more. Diagonal slash. Repeat. A pattern. Not abstract. Not expressionist. A code. She looked at the next piece. And the next. She wasn't imagining it. Each painting had repeating elements, symbols half hidden beneath color. Sharp corners. Split bars. Some looked like letters, but twisted. Others like symbols she'd seen once in an obscure art history class on coded communication during wartime. Her chest tightened. She didn't know what it meant. But she knew what it was. A message. Buried in the paint. And Nora hadn't told her a damn thing. She waited until Friday to confront her. They met at their usual cafe. Mid-morning. Rain slicking the windows. Cass ordered black coffee. Nora got tea. Nora looked tired. Not in the grief way. In the watched way. Cass sat across from her. Studied her best friend's face. "You've been painting a lot," she said casually. Nora blinked. "Yeah. It helps. Looks different. I'm trying new techniques." "Are you also trying secret military code?" Nora froze. Blinked again. "Excuse me." "Don't insult me, Nora," Cass leaned forward. Her voice low. Sharp. "I may not be in espionage, but I know symbols. You're hiding something. And you've buried it in the paint." Nora's eyes darted to the door. To the street. "Not here," she whispered. Cass swallowed hard. So it was true. And it was big. They drove 30 minutes to Cassidy's studio above the flower shop she managed when she wasn't at the gallery. Inside, surrounded by canvases and oils and drying clay, Nora finally exhaled. She sat on the floor. Legs crossed. Hair messy. Cass pulled out her laptop. Opened the photo of the red painting. What does it mean? She asked. And don't lie. Nora looked at her for a long time. Then she said, Lucien's alive. Cass almost dropped the laptop. What? He didn't die in the explosion. He was taken. Escaped. Found me. We've been in hiding. Cass's mouth went dry. What? Why, Jesus, Nora. I couldn't tell anyone. It was too dangerous. Cass paced. Ran a hand through her curls. Her pulse was a hammer. Her stomach a knot. So what's in the paintings? Locations. Names. Timestamps. Evidence. In case something happens to us. Cass sat heavily. You're building a trail. Yes. Cass stared at her best friend, the girl who once cried over losing a crayon, and now looked like a war widow with a battle plan. And you trust me with this? You're the only one I can trust. Cass exhaled. Nodded. Stood. Okay. Then we do this together. They spent the next 5 nights photographing every painting. Cass created a digital folder. Catalogued the patterns. Ran them through encryption filters. She didn't know how to break military-grade code, but she knew who might. Her older brother, Theo, worked at a cybersecurity lab in Portland. He owed her at least 6 favors and a clean record after she bailed him out of a DUI when they were 23. She didn't tell him everything, just that she was working on a conceptual code art project for a show. Theo ran the scans. And a week later, he called. Cass, what the hell is this? You tell me. This is a modified base 64 string embedded in visual patterns. I've never seen it done this clean. Can you decode it? I already did. Pause. It's a shipment manifest. Covert. Eastern Corridor. Weapons and, Jesus, prototype tech. Cass's blood turned to slush. You didn't share this, did you? No, but someone flagged the search string. You need to lay low. Too late for that. Cass hung up. Turned to Nora. We have to go. They left that night. Cass packed only what mattered, her cameras, the encrypted drive, and the lucky red brush Nora gave her in college. Nora drove. They headed east. Toward the mountains. Lucien met them at a truck stop outside Pine Hollow. Cass hadn't seen him in a year. He looked like someone who'd bled truth out of every pore. He hugged Nora. Then looked at Cass. Thank you, he said simply. Cass nodded. I'm in this now. Whether I want to be or not. We'll keep you safe. Cass shook her head. Don't promise that. They stayed in a safe house run by one of Lucien's old contacts, a woman named Merv who had 3 phones and a scar across her temple. Cass didn't ask questions. Instead, she spent her days helping decode. Sort. Analyze. Her nights she painted. Not for the gallery. For herself. Small things. Fragments. Memories. Because when the world feels like it's cracking, painting keeps you steady. Nora slept beside Lucien now. And Cass felt a strange ache in her chest. Not jealousy. Not quite. Just, the sharp distance between love and safety. Between being left behind, and being protected. On the 10th day, they heard news. One of the names from the decoded list, Eve Valentine, was found dead in a motel fire outside Houston. Cass stared at the TV. They're cleaning house, she said. Lucien nodded grimly. We need to move faster. Cass stood. Went to her laptop. Then let's burn them before they burn us. They used the gallery's backend to leak files anonymously. 3 major outlets picked up the story within 48 hours. An unnamed whistleblower. Photos. Logs. Encrypted records. Corruption. Tech smuggling. Deaths covered as accidents. They'd started a fire now. And there was no going back. 2 nights later, the safe house was breached. Kaz had just started another painting when the glass shattered. Lucien pulled Nora down. Merv fired 2 shots through the front door. Kaz grabbed the encrypted drive. The painting. They fled through the kitchen. Into the woods. Running. Stumbling. Breathless. Kaz dropped her brush. Left it behind. They relocated. Again. Small cabin. Lake out back. Satellite phone buried in a toolbox. Kaz couldn't sleep. Not after hearing the whistle of bullets. The way Nora screamed. The smell of gunpowder. She stood on the porch. Watched the moon. Lucien joined her. "Thank you," he said again. Kaz didn't answer at first. Then. "She saved me when I was 16. When my mother drank herself into silence. When I didn't know who I was. She made me paint my way out of it." Lucien looked at her. Carefully. "I won't let anything happen to her." "You better not," Kaz said. "Because if she dies, I'll paint your damn grave." He smiled. And it didn't look like a ghost anymore. It looked like a man who might actually win this. Kaz finished her new painting 2 weeks later. This time, no code. No symbols. Just Nora. Standing in the rain. Holding a lantern. Behind her, in the trees, a shadow. But this time, the shadow wasn't watching. It was protecting. And Kaz finally believed they might make it out alive. He was halfway through his morning routine, 1 black coffee, 2 cigarettes, no food, when the knock came. 3 raps. A pause. Then 1 more. The pattern hit him like a brick to the stomach. It was old. Very old. He hadn't heard that knock in 5 years. Not since the day he disappeared. Damien Cruz stood, slowly. Barefoot, shirtless, a map of pale scars across his back like rivers dried in the sun. He lived in a cabin near the northern border, tucked behind a scrapyard, off a service road that didn't show up on GPS. No one should have found him. And yet. Someone had. He checked the peephole. No one there. Just an envelope on the porch. He opened the door, retrieved it. Scanned the tree line. Quiet. Still. He shut the door, locked all 4 bolts, and sliced the envelope open. Inside, a single photo. A painting. Red background. Vertical strokes. Geometric pattern. 3 symbols he recognized but hadn't seen since the Breyer program. His hands shook. Because he hadn't painted that. But someone had. And they were calling him back. Damien had once been a ghost, a cipher analyst under a black budget unit so deep in the ground it didn't have a name, just a letter, R. He could see the world in code. Lines in coffee stains. Morse in rain patterns. Languages buried in static. His mind was a labyrinth, and someone, somewhere, thought that was useful enough to train. And later, dangerous enough to silence. He left the agency after the Prague breach. 4 people died. One of them was his fault. The others, well, he hadn't stuck around to find out. He went cold. No contact. Burned IDs. New face. New town. He'd stayed buried. Until now. He decoded the painting in 2 hours. Not because it was easy, but because it was familiar. Layered encryption. Partial substitutions. Mirrored glyphs. Classic R style. The message beneath the strokes read. Echo still breathing. Noise in the thread. Location compromised. Need new hand. Damien stared at the line for a long time. Echo was a code name. A damn old one. But noise in the thread, that wasn't metaphor. It was protocol. It meant they were watching the watchers. That the original operation had been flipped. It meant the system had eaten itself. And the last part, need new hand, that was the kicker. They were asking for a cleaner. A fixer. Him. He didn't know who painted the message. Not yet. But he knew someone alive had used that knock to find him. Someone trained. And only one person he remembered ever liked hiding messages in art. Cassidy Rourke. The last time he saw Cass, she was 19 and furious. He'd been training her in code work. She was brilliant, better than anyone in their cohort. Sensitive in ways that made her dangerous to hard men. She left when the agency tried to fold her into fieldwork. Refused to carry a gun. Refused to break someone just to get information. He admired that. Envied it. He thought she was long out of the game. Until now. He found them by tracking digital anomalies. Someone had accessed a dark archive tied to an old weapons program, Project Nightglass. He bounced the signal, watched it jump. Then he saw her. A grainy photo. Cassidy. Walking out of a convenience store with two others. The woman was Nora Jensen. He remembered her too, from a leak investigation back in the Madrid circuit. And the man? Damien froze. Lucien Mercer. Dead. Or supposed to be. His fingers hovered over the keys. A dead man walking. A code hidden in art. An analyst with old ghosts in her teeth. And all of it circling back to the agency that trained him to disappear. He packed a bag. Loaded the gun he hadn't touched in years. And went hunting. He found them at a cabin in the Black Pines, an old staging location from back when the agency still used paper trails. He didn't approach the door. Not yet. He watched for 2 days. Cass came out first each morning, always scanning the horizon like she knew someone was watching. Lucien paced the lake, favoring his right leg. Nora painted outside sometimes, always small canvases, fast work, brushstrokes like smoke signals. He waited until night. When the porch light was out and the windows shuttered. He stepped from the trees and left his card. An actual card. Paper. Thick. Black print. No name. Just a symbol. The letter R burned into the center. They found it the next morning. And when Damien returned that night, they were waiting. He stepped into the clearing. Cass held a flashlight on him. Lucien had a gun. Nora was silent. Took you long enough, Cass said. Damien smiled faintly. You always did love the dramatic entrance. What do you want? Answers, he said. Same as you. Lucien narrowed his eyes. Who the hell are you? Someone who used to clean up the kind of messes you're standing in. How did you find us? Nora asked. He lifted the printout. The painting. This. Cass exhaled. So you got the drop. You shouldn't have used a code from R, he said. But I guess you figured only a ghost would respond. You gonna help us? Lucien asked. Or report us? Depends, Damien said. How far down do you want to go? Cass stepped forward. All the way. They laid it out on the table. The files. The photos. The manifests. Lucien showed him the list of names. Cass shared the pattern of coded paintings. Nora added handwritten notes, timestamps, shipment logs, voice memos. Damien read it all. Slowly. And at the end, he sat back and said. This isn't just corruption. They waited. This is cleanup for a project that should have never existed. Night glass, Lucien said. Damien nodded. And that means you're up against more than rogue agents. You're up against legacy clearance. Nora looked confused. What's that? It means, Damien said, you're in the kind of deep where the law doesn't go. Where accountability doesn't exist. Where entire divisions exist to erase what you found. Then how do we fight it? Cass asked. Damien looked at her. Eyes tired. But steady. We don't fight. We expose. And we vanish. Lucien shook his head. We've already vanished once. Then vanish better. They worked through the night. Damien showed them how to create a double-blind data burst, one that split the evidence into fragments and sent them through dozens of trusted contacts with failsafes. He helped Nora refine her code structure. Added layers. He and Lucien argued, often, but always over tactics, not goals. Cass was the bridge between them. And in the quiet hours, Damien sometimes watched her. The way her fingers curled around a brush. The way her eyes narrowed when she thought. He didn't know what this feeling was. But he hadn't felt it in a long time. Hope. Maybe that was it. On the fourth day, a drone buzzed the tree line. They dropped everything. Damien led them to an emergency tunnel, built into the foundation during the Cold War. As they huddled underground, Lucien asked. How long do we have? Not long. Cass held the encrypted drive. Then let's make it count. They reached the drop point at dawn, an old weather station turned comms tower. Damien set up the burst. Hands flying. Once I press this, everything we have goes to the right people. Senators. Journalists. Watchdogs. Hell, maybe even a few honest men. And us? Nora asked. Damien looked at her. We disappear. Lucien stepped forward. What if they find us anyway? Then we burn the rest, Damien said. And start again. Cass touched his arm. Together? He looked at her. And this time, he didn't hesitate. Yeah, he said softly. Together. He pressed the key. And the world changed. An hour later, they watched the first story break on live news. Anonymous sources. Encrypted evidence. Whistleblowers. The headlines screamed. Black program exposed, government tech in hands of global mercenaries. The web lit up. So did the hunt. And somewhere in the chaos, 4 ghosts vanished again. One of them smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, Damien Cruz felt like a man again. Not a shadow. Not a mistake. A man with something to protect. And maybe, if he was lucky, something to love. The lake was still again. Nora Jensen stood at its edge, barefoot, the wind tugging at her hair. The sunrise made ripples of gold over the surface. Somewhere behind her, the others were still asleep, Cass, Damien, Lucien. 3 weeks had passed since the burst. 3 weeks since they'd exposed the program. 3 weeks since they became ghosts again. Yet this place, tucked into the belly of a forgotten forest in Quebec, felt strangely alive. Like something healing. She curled her toes into the mud. The world hadn't ended. But everything had changed. They were different now, all of them. Lucien still woke from nightmares, but now he reached for her without shame. Cass was quieter in the mornings. Sharper at night. She and Damien spent hours locked in arguments, half in code, half in flirtation neither would admit. And Nora herself? She didn't know the name for what she had become. Not just a teacher. Not just a woman who had once grieved a dead man and then kissed him back to life. She was something in between. Dangerous. Maybe. Awakened. Probably. Unbreakable? She wasn't sure. But she no longer felt like glass. She returned to the cabin and brewed coffee. The old kind. Over the stove. Bitter as hell. Lucien appeared behind her, hair messy, hoodie half-zipped. He kissed the back of her neck. "You always make it too strong," he murmured. "You always drink it anyway," she replied. He smiled against her shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. She paused. Then nodded. "Better." They didn't talk about the stories on the news anymore. Not unless they had to. Someone else had taken up the fight now, reporters, whistleblowers, investigators. The narrative was out of their hands. And that was the plan. Lucien said it best on the night they triggered the burst. "Our job isn't to win the war. It's to shine the first light." The rest was out of their control. And Nora was learning to be okay with that. By mid-morning, Cass and Damien were working on something by the generator. Lucien had gone to scout the radio tower again, just in case. Nora stood in front of a blank canvas. She hadn't painted since the last message. Not with purpose. Not for herself. Now, though, something called to her fingers. Not code. Not strategy. Truth. So she painted. Not in the bold, sharp lines she'd used to communicate danger. But in slow sweeps. Color. Story. She painted a figure by the water. Face hidden by hair. And another, reaching out of the trees. The two of them meeting where sun met shade. She didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But she would. That night, they lit a fire. A small one. Not for warmth. For ritual. Cass toasted bread. Damien sharpened a blade while pretending not to notice her sneaking glances at his hands. Lucien sat close to Nora, fingers laced with hers. They didn't talk about tomorrow. Tomorrow meant movement. New names. New borders. They'd agreed to split, for separate paths. Keep the threat level low. Stay invisible. Rebuild elsewhere. It was the smart move. And it broke her heart. Not in the way Lucien's death had once broken her. This was quieter. A slow fracture. One born of love. Of knowing too much. Of understanding that some bonds could only survive at a distance. After the fire died down, she pulled Lucien aside. They stood near the trees, where no one else could hear. "So this is it?" she asked. He looked at her. Moonlight cut across his cheek. For now. She hated that answer. Hated the vagueness. The shadowed safety of it. But she understood. "Where will you go?" she asked. He shrugged. "East. Maybe Berlin. Hawthorne has a safe line there." She nodded. "And you?" "Back to art," she said. Quietly. Under a new name. He reached for her hand. Held it like it might vanish. "We'll find each other again," he whispered. "Promise?" she asked. He kissed her. Deep. Unhurried. When he pulled back, his eyes were full of something both heavy and light. Always. They left at dawn. Cass went west, to Vancouver, under the name Tess McCall. Damien headed south, through Montana. False plates, fresh haircut, coated burner. Lucien hugged her last. Longest. He held her for what felt like hours. Neither of them cried. They couldn't afford to. Instead, she whispered. "Remember the lantern." He nodded. And then he was gone. The cabin felt hollow without them. But Nora stayed one more week. To clear her head. To paint. To remember. She walked the lake every morning. Sat in the stillness every night. And on the final day, before she left for her new life, she painted one last canvas. No codes. No patterns. Just a woman standing in the middle of the woods. Looking back over her shoulder. Eyes wide. Not with fear. With hope. Nora Jensen boarded the train to Montreal under the name Elena Darcy. She had a duffel of supplies, 2 forged IDs, and a flash drive with encrypted backups, just in case. She also had a folded note from Cass, a matchbook Damien left in the cabin, and a pressed photograph Lucien had taken of her by the water, years ago. She clutched it when the train began to move. Not for nostalgia. For strength. For memory. For everything they'd been through, and everything they still could become. The past had opened its mouth and tried to swallow them. But they'd slipped through its teeth. And now they were wind. Everywhere. Watching. Waiting. Ready.